Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Z Hoops podcast. Today I'm joined by the head coach of the Hobart College Statesmen, Coach Stefan Thompson. Coach Stef, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. I've been watching a lot of your episodes, and I'm very fortunate to be the next guest.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'd like to kick off our little conversation here. Can you talk a little bit about your connection to the game of basketball?
Yeah, I think basketball has always been something I've been gravitated towards. Probably 2 years old, just having a ball around the house, Fisher-Price hoop. I know my grandmother used to have a huge Michael Jordan life-size poster on one of her doors in our house growing up. So I think basketball's always been a cool thing. And just growing up in the 90s, you get a little bit of that NBC music playing on Sunday. You got, Jordan at the Garden, those type of things there. And you hear the stories of, Bird versus Magic, Lakers, Celtics. So I think the sport just naturally pulled me in. No one in my family really committed to playing it, but I think they also pushed me to do it. So very fortunate to have some people that supported my dreams early in life, and I'm glad I found the game. I think it's one of the best games in the world.
You named all those NBA legends like Magic and Bird and Jordan. Was there ever like a predominant player during your childhood who you really wanted to model your game after?
Yeah, I think the first person was Allen Iverson. Just culturally, when he came in the NBA, obviously he went right at Michael Jordan with that infamous crossover there. But I followed him even prior to that, just Georgetown days, because I grew up a Syracuse basketball fan. So seeing SU versus Georgetown in that rivalry, and all the great things Allen Iverson did during those days. And then being a small guard, undersized, being tough and gritty. I knew I never was going to be a 6'8" player. So seeing a guy that can get to the NBA and play with his heart, play with some passion, was naturally a person I gravitated towards. And then I was an only child growing up too. So a lot of my days I would be playing Beat the Pro in my own driveway or at my own local park. Imagining myself going against a guy like Allen Iverson, and I learned a lot of his moves, his crossovers, his step backs, his spins, his ability to be crafty. So he's definitely probably the first player I emulated my game after.
You talked about growing up as an only child. I actually grew up as an only child as well. I'll kind of like imagine myself like, national championship on the line, like buzzer beater going down, like 5, 4, 3, 2, picturing like LeBron on the Heat is like guarding me or something like that. So I can connect to you on that point.
Absolutely.
There. So you talked about as well growing up as a Syracuse basketball fan. You also were raised in the Syracuse area, correct?
Yeah, born and raised on the south side of Syracuse, and just my mom and I for the first 10 years of my life, and then my brother came along and my sister came along. So being that only child quickly shifted. I had to be an older brother, which was really cool. But grew up right in the south side of Syracuse near Khoorchand High School, and we'd go to Higher Onondaga Park a lot to play. A lot of my kids in my neighborhood were into sports, so I was very fortunate. All day we were playing sports. We'd get up in the morning, we'd maybe play some basketball from 9 to 11, go to our local corner store, get our freeze pops, bag of chips, hang out for a little bit, listen to some music, and then, we're going to play football at noon. After that, we're going back to play basketball or playing baseball. So, being able to be in a great environment in the neighborhood where technology, obviously today it's very prevalent. We didn't all have cell phones. So, we had to play to have fun. And I think that's where my competitive spirit was developed, just, being on the streets, trying to figure out how can I beat this guy across from me. And I love the era I grew up in. I'm very fortunate. And I think Syracuse obviously played a big role in that, being a huge sports town as well.
As we all know, like the game has changed from era to era. Do you think like the sense of competitiveness really isn't there in this year's generation? Because we don't see a lot of kids nowadays playing on the blacktop out there in these parks.
Yeah, I think it's just you can never change the era, right? You got to live in it and you got to thrive in it. I wouldn't say the kids today's competitive nature isn't as strong as the other people's. I think it's just it's SSBU's differently. For us, going to a playground and playing on the cement and the heat, and hopefully playing 3 games that day, because if you lost, you had to sit for maybe an hour or two. I think today kids sometimes maybe even deal with burnout more than we dealt with in our era. So I think that is a component that obviously factors into the competitive nature. But I wouldn't say that kids nowadays are less competitive. If anything, they have to give multiple efforts within their competitiveness, because they got to go lift, they got to have their nutrition. Like everything is pretty regimented for kids these days. Where, as I mentioned, I'm going to eat a freeze pop before the game or a bag of chips and going to still play. So I think it's just eras are different. The cream rises to the top. The guys that want to win, the girls that want to win are always going to be the ones that are putting the extra effort in, finding any competitive angle. So I think that's prevalent in any era that you go back and study.
While doing my research for this interview here, I asked around about your upbringing, especially like from our coaching staff, and especially like the seniors on the team. They mentioned to me about a specific Syracuse Dome story. Can you talk a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I grew up going to Syracuse basketball games and was fortunate to be a ball boy for them growing up, which was a really cool experience. I started my 7th grade year and was there all the way until about my 9th or 10th grade year as well. So I think the most impressive Dome story I had was during Jerry McNamara's senior day, which obviously we played Siena this past year, which was a really cool full circle moment. But Jerry is from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I want to say he brought up about 40 busloads of people. And Syracuse was playing on a Sunday, noon tip-off, which was pretty cool because the Dome was, as you know, it has like the canopy top, well lit. It was very bright in there that day. And on that day, Jerry and his fans and just the Syracuse community broke the largest on-campus record for attendance. So I think it was around 33,000 people. And there was people that were sitting in the Dome, Ashton, that couldn't see the court. They were watching from the Jumbotron. And that was a big-time matchup because Villanova was number 1 in the country. I want to say they had Randy Foye, Kyle Lowry, Alan Ray. Wow. So it was a big-time matchup, old Big East basketball, which was really fun to see. But that just showed me the power of basketball. So many people to come support one player on his senior day. And obviously there's other seniors that graduated, but Jerry had been a star on campus since he won a national championship as a freshman. And for me to just be in there, was great. And to soak that in, you had Jay Wright on the sidelines, dressed to the nines in his nice suit. You had Coach Boeheim there trying to get his team to get some momentum going into the NCAA tournament. But I would say that's probably the peak of all the Dome stories I've had in terms of just seeing what that means to our community and how many people can come watch a basketball game.
Well, that's amazing. I haven't heard a story like that since I watched The Last Dance, when all those people in Atlanta, Georgia were like packing that huge Georgia Dome just to get a glimpse at Michael Jordan. I remember they were talking about how people would be all the way in the nosebleeds. You can't even like see the court behind like all those rafters. And just to get a glimpse of the Black Cat, as they called them back then, like I can really connect to you on that point there. But so let's talk about, you talked about growing up in upstate New York and having that like gritty mentality. So like let's reflect a little on your high school career. Can you talk a little about what your tough matchups and rivalries were during your high school career?
Yeah, so I went to Christian Brothers Academy High School. It's a private school in Syracuse, which I was very fortunate to get enrolled in because the academics there are very strong. It's basically a college prep, and I started there my 9th grade year after being into the city schools district my whole life. And I think the academic hurdle was a big thing for me to get over. But once I settled in and understood how to learn differently, how to ask for help, having a good network of people, that allowed me to have that component taken care of so I could focus on basketball and things that I love. I know our local rivalries at that time were, Jamesville, DeWitt. They were in the midst of running basically back-to-back state championships. I think we also had big-time rivalries, against Bishop Ludding. Mm-hmm. It's called the Holy Wars. You have the 2 Catholic schools across town battling against each other, which I take a lot of pride. I'd never lost to Bishop Ludding, whether it was on JV or varsity in my whole career. But those places and those gyms, man, were absolutely raucous. Ashton, I know when we played JD as a JV player, our JV game would be packed because the tickets would be sold out because people wanted to get in for the varsity game. And vice versa. When I got to varsity, you were understanding that it was going to be the biggest matchup. The news stations were going to be there. There was going to be some trash talk amongst the fans and the parents. So, anytime you can be in that type of environment as a player, I think it only helps you because you have to keep your composure. You have to stick to your game plan, especially me being a point guard. I was kind of the coach on the floor. And I was very, very fortunate to have a great coaching staff and just a great school community that elevated me to give the confidence to say, hey, you're out there, have fun, go win these games. And I thought we were on the winning side for most of those matchups.
Let's go. That's amazing, man. So let's talk about your recruiting process. What other schools were you looking at, and why did you ultimately choose to attend Hobart?
Yeah, I looked at mostly upstate New York Division IIIs in our area. Went on a couple of visits here. And then I think the biggest thing during that time, we had the Empire State Games. So the New York State was broken up into all these different regions, and you would go play, all different types of sports. Basketball was one of them, but they had track and field, they had lacrosse, volleyball, things of that nature. Basketball is now kind of compressed to the BCANY or the back-and-E games nowadays. But my summer going into my senior year, I made the Empire State team, but I was in a conundrum because my AAU team was going to Las Vegas to play. Okay. So it was either stay local or go to Las Vegas. And at that time, I had never flown. So I took the opportunity to go to Vegas with the City Rocks program, and it was a great experience. And I think looking back on that, it hurt my local recruitment because maybe 3 to 4 schools probably knew about me instead of more people. But I wouldn't have changed that for anything. Looking back on it as well, Hobart was the first school to actually ever reach out to me. Coach Metz, Coach Paddock, Coach Pysnack, Coach Wenzel put a handwritten note in the mail at the end of my junior year, which was a really cool experience. And I remember the day vividly. I was in my driveway. I just got back from a summer league game, and Coach Metz called me and introduced himself to me, and just built a nice foundational relationship. And my mom and I, my grandpa, my cousin all came up here to visit that summer going into my senior year. And then I came back for another visit, I want to say in November of my senior year as well. And just the relationships at Hobart were really genuine. I already knew a player here by the name of Greg Stern, who actually was a rival of mine at Jamesville DeWitt. And, just the persistence that Coach Metz and Coach Paddock showed ultimately wanted me to be a Statesman. I didn't decide where I was going to go until after my senior year because I was so focused on trying to win a sectional and state championship. But once that season was over, I remember Coach Metz and Coach Paddock came to an all-star game to watch me, and I committed in the parking lot that day.
So let's talk about adjusting to the college level. What were your biggest challenges your freshman year, and basically what was your mindset going into your freshman year, especially being a big-time point guard coming out of Syracuse?
Yeah, I think for me, my high school was more of like a you pay your dues type of school, right? So yeah. I was fortunate to be on JV as a freshman, also fortunate to be on varsity as a sophomore, but I didn't get many minutes that year. So I was kind of coming into college with the same mindset of, hey, you may have to wait your turn. And at that time, when I committed here, Hobart had a returning starting point guard by the name of Tim Llewellyn, who was Liberty League Rookie of the Year, had a great sophomore year. So I was thinking I was going to have to play behind him for 2 years. And he gave me a nice wake-up call. I think it was our first day of pickup. I'm bringing the ball up, and Tim is Hobart's all-time leader in steals. He has shattered that record. I think the second guy is very, very far behind him. And that first day of pickup, I learned pretty quickly why he was an all-time steals leader. I'm bringing the ball up the court and trying to talk to my teammates. Next thing you know, Tim's already ripped the ball out of my hand. He's going the other end for a layup. So that just opened my eyes to how great this level was, how much I needed to improve. So that really made me humble there. But I think once we got to the practices, Coach Metz infused a lot of confidence in me. I didn't think I was going to be starting, but when we got to our first scrimmage, I was. And, he kind of nudged me and said, hey, man, this is your opportunity to be our starting point guard. And I was very fortunate that Coach Metz and Coach Pysnack, Coach Paddock, sat me down and said, hey, we believe in you. This is the things that we're going to do. We played a pressing style, which was a lot of fun to get up and down. And then Tim Llewellyn, being the statesman he was pumped for me to be the starting point guard. And he moved over to the combo 2 spot, and I thought we were a dynamic backcourt together. So I learned a lot there. I wasn't physically mature. I was 5'9", probably 140 pounds, Ashton. So getting pushed around on the college court was pretty prevalent for me. So I had to figure out other ways to be effective, whether it was my speed, my changes, direction, my mindset, just those little things that I think add up to being successful. And our team was able to get some wins early in my career to get some mojo, get some confidence going. We still weren't a championship program. So I think ultimately our locker room and our culture had to grow as well. So, I was very fortunate to play as a freshman because I could come back to campus later saying, okay, this is the things that we need to really focus on to get better at.
It's funny you said that about starting point guard picking your pocket there. Like I had a similar story, not like in the same scenario, but your senior last year, Ryan Lucy. So what I remember, like when I was playing pickup with the team, like in the fall of my freshman year, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna try and block this guy's shot. He gets me on the block, boom, boom, just barreling into me. So I'm just some skinny kid from Queens, thinking I can block this college athlete's shot. I thought I was mistaken right there, right then and there. And then that was kind of a wake up call for me as well. Okay, I got to go to the field house. I got to lift, and I got to keep up with these guys throughout the season in order to give myself the best opportunity to compete with these guys at the end of the day. So I can connect with you on that note there.
We all have that welcome to college moment.
Yeah. It's just like the pros have that welcome to NBA moment. It's not that far off actually. But you actually didn't do that bad your freshman year. You won Liberty League Rookie of the Year the D3Hoops.com East Region and ECAC Upstate Region during your freshman year. So how did it feel to win all these accolades, and how did you use this as motivation basically going forward?
Yeah, like my freshman year, when you're in the season, you're in the season, right? I think you try to block out all the other stuff and just worry about helping your team win. I know the year before I got here, Hobart won 8 games, so there was a lot of just pent up emotion to say like we want this thing to change. So my freshman year, when we're winning some games here, like we're starting to chip away at our goals as a team. So you're kind of blinded by the accolades and the other things that are happening around you just because you have to be where your feet are, as a great coach Hannah would say, right?
Yep.
I think that's important. And after the season, you get all these awards, but the season's over. And for us, we still had a sour taste in our mouth. We lost in the Liberty League Championship my freshman year by about 20 points or so. So we felt like there were still more opportunities for us to grow. We were losing 2 very good seniors and captains, and Tim Ivory and Sean McHugh, but the rest of the team was coming back. So our focus was how can we win the Liberty League Championship. So I had to kind of just process these accolades. My family was pumped for me. Obviously, my coaches and my teammates were, but me trying to be a leader, I had to be humble about those things and really just get my feet back to the pavement and put the work in. And I know for us, we wanted to be able to get stronger as a team, so we committed more to the weight room. And I think we also, at that time, we were a pressing program. We wanted to get into better shape. So as the back end of our season came around, we felt like we still could out fatigue and push teams. And ultimately, that was where my mindset was post the season, even with these awards coming my way.
This year's preseason, you added an extra day of conditioning for us. Back then in your day, when you were coming off of your big freshman year, did you guys end up doing some sort of team conditioning or any type of thing of that sort during the spring or even that next fall?
I think the fall, just our intensity in the weight room and our mindset was really focusing for us, just because I know for me, I needed to grow, right? I was small. I needed to add muscle mass and add strength. So all of us were just pumped in the weight room. We made fun of it. We had our playlist that we loved to listen to. Even I know Adam Salzman was a great captain for us my sophomore year and leader. But we were able to, after our lifts, we'd go down to the locker room and we'd do P90X workouts for 20 minutes. So we were getting that extra 1 to 5% work in just based on we knew that was going to be the thing that we had to push ourselves through. So we did whatever we could to just kind of keep pushing the needle forward for us, because I know that's what championship teams do.
What was the top song on that playlist, you'd say?
Probably Let It Burn by Usher. That was a big thing. Everyone's no one could sing on our team, but we were belching out those lyrics as best as we could.
Okay, so let's fast forward to your senior year. There's a lot of awards and honors here, but let me list out some of them. So following the 2012-2013 season, you made 3 All-American teams. The first NABC All-American in program history, D3 News 5th team, and D3Hoops.com honorable mention. You became just the 7th Statesman to record 1,500 career points, and you also had a total of 1,643 career points, which puts you at 4th on the Hobart's all-time leading scorers list. Okay, there's a lot here. Let me keep going. You also became the only statesman to score more than 1,000 points and record more than 400 assists, and you ranked 2nd on Hobart's career assist list with 492 career assists. Not to mention, your overall record was 82-31 over 4 seasons. So, when reflecting on all of these accolades, what comes to mind from your senior year?
I think just this burning desire to win a Liberty League championship. My classmates and I were very diligent about our game plan after our junior year in terms of what we wanted to do to take that next step as a program. As I mentioned, my freshman year, we made it to the Liberty League championship and kind of surprised ourselves. My sophomore year, we win the Liberty League regular season but lose in the semifinals. My junior year, we repeat as regular season champions but lose in the championship. Now, we did get a little bit of an NCAA tournament berth that year, so it gave us some experience on what that looks like. But we still had this unchecked box of winning a Liberty League championship and cutting down the net. So myself, Reason Davis, Sean Pierre, and even our manager, Dylan Hysack, all stayed in Geneva the summer prior to our senior year. I worked with Coach Hannah in the athletic department. Sean Pierre was our orientation coordinator. Reason worked in our human resources department. And Richie Bonney actually stayed around that summer. And we would get up, Ashton, and 2 days a week, we'd go run on McCooey Field and get conditioning in at 6 a.m. The other 3 days a week, we're getting in and we're going to RFK and we're lifting, at 6:30 as well. And I think it was just very important for us to say that, we don't want to look back on our career and say, oh, if I would have or if we would have done that. So that's probably the hardest we worked in terms of preparation for our season collectively. So once we came back as seniors, we were able to recognize that, hey, we put in the work. Now let's just walk the path of the journey that's laid out for us, right? And we actually got off to a pretty slow start. So we had some adversity, which all championship teams do. But I thought once we reached Liberty League play, we were able to get our groove going. And, as the year went on, I thought we were able to use our experience a little bit. Obviously, you had Richie as a junior, myself as a senior. We had some underclassmen that were really helping us as well. So when we got to that Liberty League championship game, we all just looked at each other and said, hey, like, this is the day we've been working for, right? When you look at those 6 a.m. runs, right, or the lifts, like, this is why we want to be here. So, we just were all committed to doing whatever we had to do to win that game, and we were very fortunate we were able to. And just that sigh of relief after cutting down the nets. It wasn't even like a celebration of excitement. It was more relief. And I think that's what sometimes the journey presents itself as. When you put the work in, the end is what you're expecting to get. But I think it was a collective thing. So when you talk about our career record as a class, that's the thing I'm most proud of, because that's all of us doing that together. And I think we were the first class to have 4 consecutive winning seasons. So it just sets a trend for our program, and our expectations were able to rise. And, as you say, and people always say, like, leave it better than you found it. And I think ultimately our class was able to do that.
The fact that you're saying all that, it's kind of like a full circle type of moment here, because all the stuff you always tell us in the huddle is like, you think anyone else in our league is doing what you guys did in the fall. You think anyone else in the country is doing what you guys just did, like waking up at like 5:30, like almost every day this week. So it's kind of like coming all full circle now. The fact that you were doing that when you were here, and now you're kind of like bestowing it upon us. So we have that sense of hunger as well. It's really cool, actually.
I think there's a process to winning a championship, and not many people are willing to go through it. And sometimes you have individuals that are willing to, but ultimately you got to have the collective, right? You have to have the whole team willing to push themselves. And I think everyone says they want to be champions, they want to be great, but are they willing to pay the price? Right. And I think once you go through that experience and you see what it takes to get it, now it only fuels you to say you can do it again, but it only gets harder. The one thing I love about it is very transferable to other things in life as well, not just sports. So if you want to get something done in your career, you want to get something done for your family, just knowing you can go that extra mile or two at times is what ultimately is going to get you where you want to go. And if you do come up short, you can say, hey, I gave it my best, right. But then you also can refine the process and say, hey, maybe I should do this a little bit differently. So that's my job as a head coach now, is to obviously share those stories, that wisdom. I'm just very fortunate that we have leaders, captains, and a locker room with ambassadors that want to go on that journey and are hungry to do it.
So let's look at the coaching side of things. At what point did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in coaching?
I think my interest budded probably during like Pop Warner football, Ashton. So I had to be in 4th, 5th grade, and we were on a nice travel football team, winning championships, so that was fun. But just seeing the camaraderie that a football team presented and what a coach could do. I know football is a little more like rah-rah, right? You got a lot of pregame speeches and things of that nature, but that was really cool. And just the little things that coaches were able to do for myself and my teammates. I grew up with my dad not always in the picture, so to have a coach give me a ride home or give me a meal, like those little things meant a lot to me growing up. And then I got to high school and just saw the coaching career in a different light. Obviously being a high school coach would be great. I also could see a college coach career potentially budding for me. As I mentioned, I went to Christian Brothers Academy, and my 8th grade year, the biggest player in our area, prior region, was Greg Paulus. So my high school coach, always told stories of Coach K or Roy Williams coming into CBA, and you see these pictures on his wall, and you're like, oh, maybe I could be a college coach. So I think that vision of where coaching could take you is ultimately where it started to happen, probably my 9th or 10th grade year. But it's such a long way, right? Because you got to check the box of still being a player. And, I was very fortunate just to continue to have great mentors. I think I played for one of the best high school coaches in Section 3, and Buddy Wicklinski, and also Ed Leone. And then, came here to Hobart and played for Izzy Metz and Dennis Pysnack and Coach Wenzel and Russ Phillips. So all these guys, I think, sprinkled a little bit of hope, but also insight in me of like, this is what coaching's about. And, I think probably around that high school, I started to think about it more clearly. And then college, I was all in on like, hey, this is what I want to do once I'm done with school.
So you got your first opportunity as an assistant coach at Wilkes University in 2014. So can you talk me through it? How did this position come about, and what was your experience like with that team?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I actually stayed here in Geneva. I worked with the Geneva Parks and Rec department, doing a lot of studies for them, using my sociological background to try to help the community grow in some aspects. And then October of that year, I was remember vividly, I was trick-or-treating one night with my brother and my sister. The next morning, I had a plane to Italy and had an opportunity to pursue my professional basketball career. But within a month there, unfortunately, I got injured. I got a stress fracture in my foot. So I remember sitting, in my room there in Trento, trying to make a decision: do I want to rehab, get healthy, or do I want to jump into coaching? And I was 23 at the time, so I said, hey, you know what? I kind of checked that box of going overseas, so I jumped right into coaching when I got back home, and was very fortunate that my high school coach allowed me to jump on midway through season, which doesn't really happen. So I was an assistant on the varsity and an assistant on the JV with Matt Keogh. He's actually the first guy that hired me. And during that time, I was just, learning our system from a different lens at high school, working guys out. Also was trying to make some money. So I was doing taxes for people during that season. And then right around the end of tax season, my mentor, Izzy Metz, gave me a call and said he got the job at Wilkes University. And said, do you want to get the coaching? I said, yep. And he offered me the job without even having to interview or do anything. So it shows you that Hobart connection goes really, really far. And it's one of the best blessings I've ever been, bestowed upon me, was what Coach Metz allowed me to go down there. And I think I moved to Wilkes-Barre at 24 years old in June of that year, and was thrown right in the fire. I went on recruiting trips, not really knowing what it took to identify a player. But Coach Metz had a lot of faith in me and told me to trust my gut. And we had a lot of work to do there at Wilkes, and we were able to just chisel away at it, made the playoffs our first year. And, once you're able to see your teachings be able to be successful for someone else, it kind of fills your cup a little bit more to saying, hey, you're doing the right thing. So it just made me want to dive deeper into coaching. And, I'm very thankful that I was able to get that experience. I didn't really know much about coaching besides saying I wanted to do it. And couldn't have asked for a better mentor in Coach Metz, and just being able to school me to the game, because prior to Wilkes, he was coming from Boston College, obviously in the ACC. His resume speaks for itself, but the lessons he was able to share with me really, catapulted my career.
So when a lot of people think about coaching, they think it's just like all X's and O's and drawing up plays. But you mentioned recruiting and going on these recruiting trips. When you go on these trips, what made a player stand out to you? Like what attributes does a player need to have to make it be like, oh, I'm interested in this kid right here?
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought the X's and O's. I thought that was initially in my career. I spent a lot of time on that. I thought that was all coaching. And I think Coach Metz always said it's about the Jims and the Joes, not the X's and O's, right? And so when you go, obviously, evaluate players, you're trying to figure out what different characteristics are going to be out there that are going to separate players. And I think you used the word earlier, which is that competitive nature. You go to Spooky Nook, which wasn't too far from Wilkes University, and I'm going to watch a kid play at 9 a.m., 2 o'clock, and 8 p.m. If he competes hard for 3 games, that's a pretty good motor to have, right? The guy that plays hard the first game, but then drifts the second game and doesn't show up the third game, those are kids you maybe want to stay away from. Yeah. So I think that competitive nature was a big thing. At that time, we also needed guys that had some talent and were just good teammates, right? So the guys that high five, the guys that point to their teammates when good things are happening. And then I always tried to pay attention to the little things, how guys getting subbed out of games and things of that nature. But the one thing that Coach Metz always was very, very cognizant of was just the parents, right? Like what type of circle are these people coming from? Especially being in Division III level, you kind of have to understand what you're investing in. So a lot of the evaluations was not just the player, but it was the parent as well, trying to figure out if they're going to be a good fit for our program just as much as the player was.
Yeah, you mentioned Spooky Nook. A lot of us players, like when you go from those hardwood floors and then you go all the way to the back to those blue tiles, it gets pretty tough there, man.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
those guys are diving for the ball in those blue courts, right?
Oh man, don't even get me started on those blue courts. What a time though. Man. But let's get back to it. So you returned in 2017 to the Lake as an assistant coach. What made you ultimately decide to come back to Hobart?
Yeah, I think I was at Wilkes for 3 years. I was able to get a master's degree there as well. And I know Coach Metz, kind of nudged me and said, hey, it's time for you to spread your wings. So I was looking at a lot of different opportunities, but the timing worked out that Hobart was open for an assistant coaching position. And, I reached out to Coach Sweeney expressing an interest, and came up to campus for a formal interview, and just stepping foot on campus, those emotions started to kind of come back to the surface again, and why I love this place and why I thought it was special. At that point, I had been 4 years removed, and I know Coach Sweeney was building something special here, and I wanted to try to be a part of it. And I think just coming back to a place that I played and closer to family in Syracuse, those are a lot of things that were able to be checked off for me. My siblings were getting ready to approach high school, so I wanted to be around them a little bit more. But yeah, I think a lot of that came into the mix. And then Coach Sweeney, obviously with his coaching background, being at Davidson and, working at the Division I level at Elon, obviously he was a great coach at the University of Rochester as well, great player. I knew I could learn a lot from him. And I think that's what coaching's about, is never feeling like you know it all, but always trying to ask the right people to learn and grow. So, I wanted to jump back here and try to elevate where we could go. And I know Coach Sweeney wanted to win championships here, so he thought I could add some value to that as well. So it was a perfect mix, and I'm very thankful I made that decision to come back.
Being this is your alma mater, do you have like some sort of sense of pride where it's like, okay, like I want to win like every game, or you ever had that kind of moment where you feel like you care a little more than the guys who are like actually on the floor?
I would say, like, I always want to win. I think I'm always that way. If you ask my mom, when she was bringing me to my youth basketball games and I'm 6 years old, if we lose, I would throw a tantrum in the car. I would cry. So I think that burning desire to win has always been there. There's definitely some added fuel to the fire when it's your alma mater in a place that you feel like should win. So I don't think I ever say I would want to win more than the players, because you got to pump them up. You got to coach them up to be there and have that value. But I think all you can do is just share that passion. You would hope that passion is resonating with people throughout the program, whether it's alums, coaches, and players. And you just want to continue to have that edge. I think we were at a point in our program where people wanted to beat us. So we for so long were the guys that were chasing, and now we're the ones being chased. So when you are the ones being chased, you just kind of always have to have that edge. And you can never lose that perspective of what it was like climbing that mountain. So I think for our program is always about just trying to keep that focus for our team, and that's something I always try to embody when I'm walking in the building every day.
In 2019, you moved into the head coaching role. You actually became the youngest and first black head coach in athletic history at Hobart. So achieving that milestone right there, that's a huge milestone, if I would say so myself. How do you resonate with that?
It's timing, man. Timing, right? Like I didn't get the option to say when the job was going to open or whatnot. It was Coach Sweeney called me in on Easter Sunday and told me he was going to be moving in a different direction at a different school, and I was like kind of shocked by that. But then I immediately went home that night and just got to prep, to try to be the head coach here, and had no idea if I'd get the job or not. As you mentioned, I was pretty young, so there's going to be other resumes on the table that have more experience than me. But I just put my best foot forward and tried to make sure I was prepared and tried to share my vision for the program and the things that I wanted to accomplish. And, was very fortunate that I was bestowed the position here. I think it's a temporary title for me. I'm not going to be the head coach forever. And there's been a lot of great coaches prior to me. There'll be a lot of great coaches after me. It's more about trying to continue to carry the legacy of the great coaches we've had in our department as well. As you mentioned, being a young coach, I knew I had a lot to learn, right? I was able to use a lot of mentors in the department here. You have Mark Taylor at Hobart Hockey, you have Sean Griffin with Hobart Soccer. At that time, you had Mike Craig with Hobart Football. And even up the hill, you had Sally Scadden with Field Hockey, Allison Wilbur with William Smith Soccer. So just being able to pick all of these coaches' brains, knowing that I needed to grow. There was going to be so many things that happened to me our first year that I had no answer for. But I was humble enough to be able to lean into those people and obviously build a staff that was able to be fortunate. We talk about being the first black head coach here. That there's a lot of pride and emotion that comes with that. You think about a rich history of our institution, and to be able to carry that for everyone else that hopefully can follow here. You talk about breaking glass ceilings. Those are things you want to do in life. You're very fortunate to do so. You don't get to control those when they do happen, but hopefully I won't be the last one. There's many more people that are well deserving of these type of positions, and I'm hoping that I can be someone they point to that say, yep, that's why you want to give someone an opportunity.
If anyone knows anything about Hobart basketball, we have like a really amazing culture here. So we have these pillars that we pride our program on: pride, respect, unity, multiple efforts, bigger than basketball. During your first year, I actually heard this, that you created these pillars during that year. You talk about creating of the pillars.
Yeah, I think it was all hands on deck. And, as you mentioned, I was an assistant coach prior here and then got the head job. And I think my analysis of our team was that we just needed to have a collective identity, right? Like we all go to these things or this phrase, whatever it needed to be to shape us, right? I think we had a lot of individual moving parts, and you only can get so much accomplished as an individual. Like you need that collective unity, right? That collective identity. So we did a lot of team building activities that fall when I got the job here, and It started by just, surveying our guys and asking them what it means to be a statesman, right? A Hobart basketball player. And it was the work of our seniors and our whole program to really come down to these pillars. Like, they're not mine, they're ours. And we're very fortunate that we could settle on these 5 pillars. And I think credit to our first team, because they really built them up, right? You could have these words and these slogans, but they were able to attach stories to them, right? Attach meaning to them. And they really, really wanted them to be the driving force, more than me some days, which that's what you need. And I think that only catapulted the pillars themselves, because now as a head coach, I can point to them and say, hey, they worked. Now those guys that graduated can also talk to their former teammates or future teammates or, future players to say, hey, these things are really real, so buy into them. So it was a collective identity that was shaped, but it was also just a lot of work behind the scenes, for myself, Coach Smiley, Coach Pysnack, all of our captains, to say, like, we want to commit to these things. I think they could be the missing ingredient to get us to where we want to go.
So your first season as a head coach, you led the team to an overall 23-5 record and received an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. Take me through the ups and downs of that year, and how did it feel to make a Sweet 16 run in the NCAAs?
Yeah, it was a lot of adversity. I think people look at that record and, the accomplishments, but they don't see the behind-the-scenes things that we had to go through. And I think early in the year, we changed how we played on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. So, our practices, weren't always clean and crisp. There was a lot of mistakes being made, which I knew was going to happen. But the resilience our guys showed was very impressive. And I think beyond that, we had on-court adversity as well. Jack Lejeune had been our starting 3-man. I want to say 3, 4, or 5 games into the season, he goes down with a season-ending injury. So, we had to rally again, around each other to figure out how can we replace one guy. And, I always go to, Jake Preston. He's the first guy that really stepped up in my mind just as a senior that year, because prior to Jack going down, Jake was probably maybe our 13th man, and we inserted him in our starting lineup. And Jake was able to do whatever it took to be able to elevate our team. I thought it helped our guys recognize that everyone needs to be ready. But once we got to January, Ashton, we realized that we needed to make another change. And we actually pulled Jake out of the starting lineup, moved Daniel Cook into the starting lineup, who was a first year. And, Dan Cook was able to blossom in that role. Jake was awesome in taking that step back. I remember vividly we were on the practice court, and, I made the announcement we were going to make the change, and Jake stepped up and said, hey, it's not about me. It's not about me starting. It's about Dan being successful, about our team being successful, whatever it needs to get done to get our goals. And I think that speaks to our pillars, right? There's a lot of unity there. Jake had to compress his pride a little bit, and that was definitely an adverse moment. And then throughout Liberty League play, we probably had a couple of losses there that you look back on and say, you should have won that game, right? To the point where we didn't win the Liberty League regular season. We had to go on the road that year. I think RPI was hosting, and we were playing Ithaca in the semifinals, and they beat us in that game. So, you lose that game, wondering if your season is going to be over or not. And we were very fortunate the NCAA gave us an at-large bid, and I think that just invigorated our team with a lot more juice, a lot more energy. But the NCAA wasn't kind either in terms of who we had to play. We had to play St. Joe's, who at that time was going on a 25-game win streak. So we know we had a big test ahead of us, and our minds just went right back to preparation. What do we got to do to win this game? And credit to our guys for blocking out all the distractions and really compartmentalizing everything that we had to get done. And we were able to get that first win there in the NCAA tournament. That gave us even more momentum moving forward.
So after your first season as head coach, you earned a spot on the NABC Under Armour 30 Under 30 list, while also earning D3 Hoops East Region Coach of the Year. What was going through your mind to have this much success as a first-year head coach?
I don't think it was even my success. It was like our success. That's the way I looked at it, right? It was the first time our program had been to the Sweet 16. Obviously, we were cut short with COVID, right? We couldn't even compete in that game there. So I was not even worried about all these things that were coming our way in terms of accolades and all these things. I was more so concerned about our players, right? We had to basically evacuate and leave campus, and everyone had to go home. We were thinking it was going to be a 2-week, short vacation. We'd back on campus, but I didn't see our guys again, Ash, until, they showed up in August. So a lot of my concerns were just making sure guys were healthy, their families were healthy. I know people were getting COVID and going to the hospital and things of that nature. So all these accolades quickly just went right out of the window, and it was about making sure from a distance we could keep our program connected. So, we did a lot of Zoom calls. I would call our players and check in every week. I did some handwritten notes throughout COVID as well. Tried to stay sharp myself as a coach and continue to grow by reaching out to mentors or people I wanted to connect with, because whenever basketball was to be resumed, I wanted to make sure our program was ready. So I think a lot of our focus was just trying to say, what's next, what's next, what's next. And obviously in a time where you don't know what's going to happen, there's a lot of unpredictability there. You just got to stay on your toes and be reactive to things that are coming your way. So the accolades, man, like I was very fortunate to get those and appreciative of them, but I was more so proud of our team and what we were able to do throughout that, hectic period of time.
Let's fast forward a little bit to last season. So we see this beautiful trophy right here, Liberty League Championship trophy. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of this trophy? And also that season, you had our team had an undefeated season in Bristol Gym. Talk a little about the significance of this trophy and also being undefeated in this building.
Yeah, I think our program has always took a lot of pride in Bristol Gym, and credit to our three seniors, Ryan Lucy, Matt Brand, and Isaiah Washington, really just wanted to leave a legacy for themselves. I know we had won a lot throughout their time here, but we still hadn't gotten one of these. Yep. So, they were awesome. They did not miss a day of being great leaders and great captains. And I think that resonated throughout our locker room. And when you don't have that, leadership take a day off, I think it allows you to always be in pursuit of something. And I think that's why we're undefeated on our home court. Like every day we showed up here for practice ready to go. We showed up every day, I think, for game days ready to go. So I think, when you put yourself in that position, you're able to get home court advantage. And I think that played a big role in us being able to win the Liberty League Championship, which I don't think we had won one in 10 years in terms of cutting down the net. So, we had won regular season championships, but to really win the tournament is hard. And, a lot of people come up short for whatever reason. But this group last year was just so locked in, so focused. And I really want to thank our school community, too, because those crowds, man, were awesome. It's the best crowds I've ever been a part of here in Bristol, even, during my playing days and now my coaching days. Last year, we had awesome community support from HWS, Geneva. I know people were driving in from Rochester, Syracuse. So it was really, really fun to be a part of. I thought that was the extra battery we needed in our back during those games because we had, two really good opponents come to our gym. RIT was good and St. Lawrence was very good as well. And every little bit of extra help was that, cherry that was on the top for us. And I think ultimately that's what got it done for us to be the Liberty League champions.
You talked a lot about mentors over the course of your career, but we didn't talk about Coach P yet, Dennis Pysnack. I think 40 years in the job here is something absurd of that nature. That's insane. But can you talk a little about his mentorship and what is it like to be on the staff with him now?
Yeah, Coach P is the best. He's been here since 1987, so he's mentored a lot of people besides myself. I first met Coach Pysnack when I was 17 years old, and I just turned 34 this past December, so I've known him for over half my life now, which is pretty cool to say. And our relationship has continued to evolve. Obviously he recruited me. I played for him. We both were assistants, and now obviously as the head coach, he's an assistant here still. So he's a guy that has so much wisdom, so much experience, and as a young head coach, I'm very, very, very appreciative of having a guy like that on staff because he's able to just tell me stories, about this is what maybe someone did good, someone didn't do as well, so I can try to avoid those pitfalls, or even, if something was to go well, try to follow that game plan as well. But he's also such a great connector with our players. I think all of our guys love Coach P, and he finds an ability to get through to every person. He does it differently for each guy, but I think that's a great thing I've been able to learn from him. He can't coach each guy the same way. So I think for him, he has a lot of joy currently with his son Jamin here and his daughter Ella. So just seeing the big picture with the game here is really fun. If there's any guy that deserves to have those kind of sweet moments that are bigger than basketball, it's him. You look at, if you had a godfather of Hobart basketball, it's Dennis Pysnack. And, I think he continues to elevate our program day in and day out. I'm so thankful for him. I know our players are. I know our alums are. So, he's one of those guys that, he's kind of like an unsung hero. Not many people will know about him, but I think if you look back and do a deep dive into Hobart basketball, you couldn't write the history without him.
Right. So I know these guys, they would be a little mad at me if I didn't have you give them a little shout out here, but we got seniors, Aiden Rogers, Pat Healy, Hunter Mashanik, Carter Mashanik. This is their last year, their last of their 4 years here. What is the significance of this year's senior class?
Yeah, these guys, man, are been A-plus competitors, leaders since they stepped foot on campus. I have vivid memories of recruiting each of these guys. But I remember when they showed up and they moved in, Coach Horwitz and I were up in the office and shocked. It was 7 a.m. first day, and they're in the gym. And the second day, 7 a.m., they're in the gym. Third day, they're in the gym, 7 a.m. And we're like, all right, this is gonna it's going to die down, right? Once classes start, they're going to have to kind of like, all right, start getting focused on their academics, and it never drifted. These guys were collectively in here every morning their freshman year, whether it was all 4 or just 1 or just 2, but they were willing to put the work in to be great. And I think that's so important, a great lesson that I'll take for all of them, just because if you ask all those guys, are they the most talented players ever? They'd probably say no, right? They all have gifts and they all have talents, but they are able to refine those by being committed. I think as an overall class, they put the most time in Bristol Gym ever, right? Like as a collective class. And I think that's a standard and a staple that they can really hang on to. As a young head coach, I'm very fortunate to have that, because I can always point to those guys and say, hey, if you guys want to be great, these are the guys that really set the tone of what it takes to be great. And I think as their careers have evolved, they've been able to individually grow. They've been able to collectively grow, hence their captains this year. The one thing I'm so pleased with is that they're able to lead outside themselves, right? Mm-hmm. They're able to get other guys under their wing and really, help them. But it doesn't even have to be basketball, Ash. It could be career stuff, life stuff, academic things. All 4 of those guys are there. 6 a.m., midnight, whatever it is, whatever you need, they're going to be there. And I think it speaks to their character, speaks to their families and who they are. So, obviously it's their last ride, and we want to go out on top with back-to-back Liberty League championships for them and back-to-back NCAA tournament experiences, because if there's any class that deserves it, it's those 4 guys.
So I asked all my guests this last question, and it varies from whoever I'm talking to. But what are the future aspirations for your career?
For me, I want to keep winning. Here at Hobart, I think that's the biggest thing, is we have so many more things that we can accomplish as a program, and I want to try to put us in an echelon of being one of the top 25 programs consistently in the country. And once we get there, I want to go top 15, top 10. So that bar never stops for me. I think that's what makes me get up every morning and want to come into Bristol Gym and work and do whatever we can. I know it's a long journey to that path of success, but I'm willing to do it. And, obviously in order to do that, you got to continue to surround yourself around right people, and you have to have a growth mindset. And, that's where my future is focused on, is obviously trying to continue to win here for Hobart and do great things for not only our program, but for our institution. And personally, just obviously start a family and, hopefully be a good husband, a good father, a good mentor to people in my community. Those are things that, I really pride myself on.
Well, I'm just saying, before I wrap this up here, I believe Mr. Statesman deserves his own merchandise here.
Oh, wow. What is this here? Hoop swag. Awesome, man. Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
It has like a little, you're on there. You're on there.
Thank you. I can't wait to open these up and check these out. Thank you so much.
Coach Stef, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today. Let's get the job done and go back-to-back this year.
Absolutely. Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.